Born in Germany, Sylvia Rimat is based in Bristol, UK. Her work manifests in various formats, such as studio shows, one-on-one performance, encounters in public space. Her work has been presented throughout the UK and internationally in Europe and Australia, with specialists from fields including neuroscience, mathematics, psychology, biology. And I think we've known each other about 12 years now. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a long time, isn't it?
2009? Something. It was a while.
Yeah.
Sylvia, where is Some People Climb Up located, and how do you get to see it?
Yeah, so Some People Climb Up is an app that can be downloaded, and you have to make your way to Leigh Woods, to the Forestry England car park. It's a geo-located audio walk, so you need to bring your phone and some headphones, and then you will be guided through the woods wearing headphones, and you can also see it on a map. Yeah.
Can you say something about how you approached mapping the forest of your imagination and experience from your childhood onto this physical space of Leigh Woods? And if there's places where those two things diverge, maybe you can talk about that and what maybe they indicate?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different forests in this work and different perspectives on forests. So the work is really site and community specific. So when I chose to work here in Leigh Woods, I met up, for instance, with a forester here of Leigh Woods, and with two really lovely people from a fungi group, and to really find out about the tree species here, about the fungi that grow in this area. And I conducted workshops with local communities from the Northwest Walking Group and Bridge Learning Campus students who also came here, and yeah, I've got to fly here. That's the forest basically.
Yes.
And so the idea was to gather stories, personal experiences and memories from participants related to woods, related to trees, and if possible also related to this particular forest, which especially with Bridge Learning Campus, not every student had actually been here yet, but there were quite a few stories related to this piece of wood, and but also stories related to the woods in general. And so these personal stories made it into the work. But then there is also the element of my memories of growing up in the Black Forest in Germany, and I'm talking about my voice, because anyone who comes and experiences the audio walk will hear my voice and will hear that I have a European accent, a German accent. So I'm talking about the roots of my voice, which is in Germany. And so I'm talking about growing up and going to my grandmother's house, and there was the wood, the Black Forest right behind the garden gate, and I talk about us roaming around. So I bring that in, but then there are also the stories of participants from the workshops, and then during the walk I also invite the audience members to think about their personal memories and stories related to woods, as and when during the walk. So there are these different layers. And then of course, so I also ask participants to experience Leigh Woods with all the senses. So there is an invitation to touch the bark, to taste the soil, to smell the bark. It's also a journey through the forest in our brain. In the work I talk about the pyramidal neurons in our brain, which look like tree structures. And so it's kind of the audience, they walk through the actual forest here in Leigh Woods, but they also walk through the metaphorical forest in their brain, which is made up of the pyramidal neurons and neurons in general that look like trees. So it's also a walk through that forest, that it's populated by their memories. There's also the element of symbology in this work, looking at different tree species or the forest, what it means in terms of culture. And I looked at it from the perspective of Western culture and from a forest here in Britain, but in the widest sense in a European context. So there are fairy tales that are part of this work. So I refer, for instance, to Hansel and Gretel, but I also refer to Peter and the Wolf. And yes, European fairy tales. I refer to symbology of an oak tree, which is a Western symbology, because in different cultures there are different approaches and metaphors and understandings of trees and forests.
Okay. What for you and for participants are the key themes of this particular work in Leigh Woods?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in our connectivity with the forest and maybe with the natural world in the wider sense. But so I started out being really fascinated years ago by a book by Peter Wohlleben, The Hidden Life of Trees, and he's a forester, but he dips in and out of research that he had read about. And so I started with Peter Wohlleben and then looked into various academics and scientists, and I was really fascinated by the fungal networks between trees and how trees in forests communicate through electrical signals. They also communicate via chemical signals through the blossoms, but electrical signals through the fungal networks, and they can warn each other. They also can share nutrients, and
I think those are all fairly recent discoveries, aren't they?
That's right, yeah, that's fairly cutting edge. And so I compare the electrical signaling between trees with the signaling processes in our brains, the neurons that send and receive electrical signals. And so in the widest sense, I compare the complex system of the forest with the complex system of our brain. And
I was going to ask you what led you to make that connection between the ecosystem of a forest and the human brain, or the human mind, I think. Well, which is it? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, in this, I think it's a bit of both. I think it's the brain, because it's the neurons, the kind of the physical part of it. But of course, I refer also to memories, and then we are back at the mind again. So, yeah. So that was the starting point. Then I was also interested in, as I mentioned, tree symbology, in personal stories related to trees, which I collected. And it also evolved into an interest in cycles of nature and death, mortality. I also started to be interested in notions of care beyond the human species and non-human agency.
Yes.
But so that were the themes I was interested in.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
It reminds me of ideas of Gaia.
Yeah.
And I think I when I was preparing the questions and also writing down about this, what this is, some people climb up, I had a list that it's connection, communication, infiltration, things coming in and out. They advance, they retreat, and it's a cycle, to use a cliche. It's very cyclical. Perhaps this is a silly question. You said that as a child you used to eat the soil in the forest. What did it taste like to you?
That's an interesting question, because I feel it's one of those things you can't really describe in words.
Okay.
Definitely crumbly.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually more to do with the smell actually that's involved when you eat soil. I wonder if I wouldn't be able to smell it at the same time as tasting it. Eating is probably too much, it's just a small amount, but I think the sense of smell in combination with tasting it gives it this kind of specific feature experience that I can't really put in words.
Okay.
Have you tried the soil?
I tasted it.
Yeah.
I tasted it, and after you've been so eloquent, I thought it tasted like chewed cardboard.
Okay.
Although the aroma was there, and I was puzzled because soil looks so rich and it looks so full of stuff and intense. So I got a disconnect between, yeah, I've chewed bits of cardboard, they tasted like this.
Okay.
But of course there was lots of leaf litter on the ground. So that's not, I think that's not unexpected. Yeah.
So you were tasting the leaves?
Well, what is it called? Humus. It's disintegrated leaves to a large extent, isn't it? So, yeah. Yeah. So, how do you see the relationship between, and we've danced around how to, what to call these things, nature and culture, or civil society and the wild or the wilderness and civilization. Hard thing to sum up really, but the thing about that opposition is, I think as soon as you have defined the wilderness, you have invoked an opposite, which is civil society, and it works both ways. As soon as you describe physics, social relations, living in a community in harmony, you've also described the opposite, which is without any of those things, and it's something that we do know exist, but these concepts seem that without the opposition you can't define them. So just to get back to the question, how do you see that relationship between those things that are defined against each other, tameness and wildness?
Yeah, I find these binary oppositions problematic, and I think they are very much at the core of our Western thinking, and have meant that we see ourselves removed from nature and as the other. And with this work, I'm really interested to explore the opposite. Rather than the binaries, our connectedness. And I think Bruno Latour talks about intraconnectedness, and I'm really fascinated, for instance, comparing the complex system of the forest with the complex system of our brain, how much we actually share, and that we probably share more than we imagine. And I would think over the last few hundred years, human society has been really trying to set us apart from nature, from plants, animals, fungi, and most recently there is a movement towards looking into what we actually share. So there are biologists who talk about animal and plant intelligence, for instance, decision making in animals and plants, and of course it comes all down to definitions, because the definitions were created with us humans in mind. So of course a plant can't make a decision like a human does, but if you widen the definition of decision making, then you can maybe see that there is scope of making certain decisions. And so I think I'm interested to explore really our interconnectedness and with the plant and animal and natural world as such, rather than setting us apart.
Yeah, it does. And I actually think that quality of standing apart, standing outside of a rational and analytical understanding is something you bring into your work consistently. Mm-hmm. I always remember the one with the owl, what's it called?
I guess if the stage exploded.
Now I saw that as a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you I have a real memory, a real visual memory of the owl. Mm-hmm. It was not present in the work in progress, that owl. Oh. But just the fierceness of it, like whatever you're talking about here is something that in its reality is overwhelming. And that sort of jogged the whole sequence of things that happened on the stage towards, well, a sort of non-judgment. Just absorb it, because it was an example and you couldn't help but fall into it just by looking, you know. Partly because I think we are mimics. What you see, you almost unconsciously do and imitate as a human. But that is one of your techniques for going to to an experiential place. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, is this work finished? Could you move it elsewhere? And what would that entail?
So the work is finished. It can move elsewhere, but it's, as I said, it's site and community specific. So wherever it moves to, it needs to be tailored to the specific site, tree species, fungi, but also cultural context. Where is it? Is it a Western context? Is it, where in the world is it located? Who needs to be approached, and which kind of metaphors and symbology is part of it? So that changes.
So it would be rewritten if you, well, there's a whole process of understanding the material, I guess.
So if it moves somewhere else in Britain, then it would be a matter of, it would always be adjusted. But in Britain it would be relatively a relative small adjustment to relate to the specific woodland, to relate to bring in participants' personal stories related to that woodland. If it would go to another context in terms of, so for instance, if it would be invited to Australia, then depending on where it would be located. It's a big chance that I would try to communicate with Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islander peoples to find out more about their understanding of woodland. So, so there is this element of the work that needs to fit the context, really.
Okay. How do you advance to your next project?
Yeah, so I'm really interested to explore further our connectivity with the natural world. I'm interested in, for instance, that the microbiome in our body versus the microorganisms in soil, but also we have all these, we've got fungi and bacteria all over the skin, and so I'm really interested in, I'm planning a project that has currently a working title, Soft Edge, and the idea is of a soft edge. It's not like a, so if you talk, for instance, a surface, it's not a hard cut surface, but in a certain way permeable. So the idea is, if you talk about us humans and nature or the environment, the ecology we live in, it's not like a clear-cut separation.
Yes.
Maybe that's how much I can talk about at the moment.
Yes, okay, it sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Sylvia Rimat, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts here.
And thank
this
you.
Beautiful work,
yeah.
honestly.